Hello, everybody. Welcome to College Football Coast to Coast with episode 10. You believe that, Mark? It's been 10 episodes already.
Sounds good. Perfect 10. Will
10
this be
weeks.
the show?
Yeah, that's right. And we have a doozy for you today. A lot of big news. Myself and Mark have been staying on top of this, like the media gurus that we are. So yesterday, on Sunday, the big news came out that head coach of the South Carolina Gamecocks, Will Muschamp, has been relieved of his duties. Now, for me, I'm not surprised that this happened, Mark. I think that most people thought that because of the weird year with the coronavirus and all the different restrictions, that most coaches were going to get a free pass here. Now, in a normal year, a non-pandemic year, this is the time of year when you start seeing some firings happen, right? We're more than halfway through the season for most of these teams. Teams that had high expectations and they only have 1 or 2 wins on their schedule so far. A lot of times you see coaches get fired. I'm not surprised that he was going to get fired. I thought it might have happened after the season. I am a little bit surprised that it happened this early in the calendar because of the coronavirus. But the real question is here, did he deserve to be fired? I think the answer to that is probably yes. But where do they go from here? Because this has been the problem with South Carolina in the past. First of all, it's hard to hire an elite head coach. I mean, very few schools, get 10 out of 10 on the scorecard when they go to hire a new coach. But their philosophy behind hiring coaches is what I've pointed out as being wrong. The Steve Spurrier hire on paper was a good one, and they won a lot of games when he was there. Still never won the SEC. But that was never meant to be a long-term thing, I don't think. It certainly wasn't in Steve Spurrier's mind. He probably stayed there actually longer than he thought he would. But Lou Holtz and Will Muschamp, Steve Spurrier. So what they like to do is go after these coaches that already have a track record somewhere else, or great coaches or national championship winning coaches in Lou Holtz and Steve Spurrier's case at another school. But they are towards, the twilight of their career, and they go to South Carolina. I think, and I've said this 100 times, that a place like South Carolina, being in the hotbed of recruiting, being in the SEC, geographically located in perfect spot for today's recruiting, you need to go after a younger guy without such a history. Maybe somebody from the group of 5, maybe an assistant coach that's currently on the staff, which we're hearing a lot of, maybe Mike Bobo. I don't know if there's any truth to that or not. Probably won't know for a couple of more months now. The only thing I will say about this is Ray Tanner yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, during the press conference said that he would like to have a coach hired by the third week of December, before the early signing period happens, for obvious reasons, for recruiting. And that he also hinted at going after an offensive-minded head coach, which I thought was kind of odd for him to say that this early in the process, instead of just saying we're going to evaluate all coaches. He said basically the days of us winning or losing games 10-7 are over with. In other words, we're going to score points. Mike Bobo is an offensive guy, so that would put him at the top of the list. What do you think about what transpired yesterday in Columbia?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
The first point would be concerning the virus. I bought into the same theory that coaches would be protected, because it did make sense that there would be leniency given to, okay, it's difficult to prepare a team for this season because of all the missed time, but more so from the financial aspect that many of these universities had to furlough or lay off employees. They have had to cut the salaries of employees. So to turn around and buy out a contract for $13 million didn't necessarily seem to be a good look, or something that a university would want to financially commit to. But now that we've got a coach fired, depending on where the replacement comes from, if it's a retired coach, then it's not going to have the impact. But if it's an existing coach, then it starts the cascade, because that coach leaves that school, then they've got to be replaced there, and on and on and on. So this could start the cascade. I think what Ray Tanner might be getting at in terms of an offensive hire is that it was always thought, and I think rightfully so, that defense wins championships, which, let's face it, they both win championships. You need both. You can't have, as Oklahoma's proven, an awful defense and win a championship. You need both, but it's leaning and it's swayed from defense to offense, to defense being more important, to offense being more important. And if you're not going to win big, as they probably aren't at South Carolina, at least excite the fan base by scoring a lot of points. Now, in the last few weeks, the other team's been scoring a lot of points against the guru defensive coordinator that Will Muschamp is. So, Mike Bobo, see, I think you're on to something good in regards to the Lou Holtz, Steve Spurrier type hire not being it. I would also not like to go after somebody without any track record. I would like to go to the guy that's 40, 45, 50 years old, who's got a track record. It might be at a group of five. It might be at a lesser Power 5 school where he's shown that he can handle a program and build it and win.
Yeah. Some interesting names coming up. I mean, these guys are the same guys that you're going to see if there's any more coaches fired between now and January 1, which there probably will be at least one or two more. You're going to hear these same names over and over again, right? Luke Fickell is at the top of everybody's list. It seems like he's probably the hottest candidate for a head coaching job in the Power 5 right now. From what I understand, he turned down the Michigan State job. Was that last year?
Yes.
So he knows he's a hot commodity, because if you're a group of 5 coach, at a very good program, nonetheless, Cincinnati's a great program. But if you're turning down Power 5 jobs, that means you know your worth. And at this point, it's just a matter of time that you can sort of pick and choose what your destination is going to be. You don't have to take the first offer that comes along. So that begs the question, Mark. Luke Fickell, do you think that he would consider the South Carolina job if he wouldn't even consider going to Michigan State? The question that I'm bringing up and asking, and I think it's an interesting question. Historically, we know who the better football program is. It's been Michigan State, right? But is it a better job now in 2020? And I would say, as of right now, I think South Carolina is a better job than Michigan State.
With better potential. And
Yeah.
I also think you have to look at most coaches that played at a particular university, especially when that's Ohio State, that's their dream job. It was Urban Meyer's dream job, not that he played there, but he grew up in Ohio. That was his dream job. He said that a long, long time ago. So for Luke Fickell, I'm sure his dream job is Ohio State, but you can't wait around at Cincinnati waiting for the Ohio State job to open. So you go somewhere else. So there might be two reasons I'm thinking that he didn't want to go to Michigan State, because they ended up overpaying for Mel Tucker because they just wanted a coach with some level of competency. So anyway, he would have to coach against Ohio State and be in the same division. And I also think that at the time, it looked like the Penn State-Michigan climb would be big too. So he'd be stuck in this, we're fourth, and it's difficult to get past Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. And how can I really win? The high school football is not great in Michigan. It's okay. I'm going to have to go elsewhere. And he kind of saw what happened to D'Antonio, who did a great job for the first half of his tenure. And then he got stuck in this fourth place position and couldn't get out of it. And would he really have the resources to get past those three? But he goes to South Carolina. He's got recruiting, a footprint that's better than at Michigan State. He gets away from having to compete against the school he eventually wants to go to. And he's just in a different part of the country. And I think he would consider it, but I don't know the man, but I think he would consider it. And I do think it's a better job right now than Michigan State.
I would tend to agree. Another name that's coming up a lot is the head coach of Coastal Carolina. And that's a very obvious choice because, first of all, but for what he's done there has been exceptional. Plus, geographically, I mean, Coastal Carolina is very, very close to Columbia. He's got a recruiting footprint in the state of South Carolina and the surrounding states. So that would be an interesting one as well. And then, of course, you get the other big name coaches that were, recently at another school. Hugh Freeze. Although I don't think Hugh Freeze is actually a viable option. He comes with a lot of baggage and a program that's in shambles the way that South Carolina's is. That they don't need Hugh Freeze's problems on top of their own. And then, of course, when I heard this morning, Mark, I thought was interesting. And then I don't know why it didn't click before, but it was Paul Chryst. Why would that happen?
That didn't click with me.
Yeah, I don't get it.
That almost speaks of Brett Bielema going from Wisconsin to Arkansas, a Big Ten coach going from Wisconsin to an SEC school. And Bielema did it because he wanted a challenge and because he made a lot more money at Arkansas than he did at Wisconsin.
Yeah. But it makes zero sense for that to happen. I mean, I heard it on the radio this morning and I was kind of, did a double take at that. I was like, well, who's coming up with that name for that?
Finishing
doesn't make much sense to me.
When you're finishing in the top 10 to 15 in the country and going to Rose Bowls, and why go to South Carolina and sit behind Florida and Georgia and possibly Tennessee, and just seems like a difficult lift.
Yeah, plus we'll talk about this soon, but the way the Big Ten's shaking out right now, Wisconsin has as good a chance to win the Big Ten as anybody else, it seems like, as of right now. I still think it's obviously Ohio State and everybody else, but they're right there in the mix. So anyway, interesting stuff going on down there in Columbia, and some of the that begs the question. Some of the other coaches that are are quote unquote on the hot seat. I've heard of James Franklin, which well, let's just go through some of these disappointing teams. Right, the obvious ones in the Big Ten are Penn State. The rumblings about Jim Harbaugh being fired, this is an annual thing, so this is really nothing new. However, have they started a season as bad as they have this year under Jim Harbaugh? No, not even close, right?
No.
Right.
Yeah, they're at a completely different level with him now.
Yeah.
I was defending him through this last season. Not that he was winning championships, because that's what he's paid to do, but that he was capable. And now they're just awful. Yeah.
I'm still of the opinion that Jim Harbaugh will not be fired under his current contract. Maybe it's in the last year of it or something. How much does he have left on the contract, Mark?
I believe it's through 21.
Oh, okay. So one more year. I guess it is possible then. My opinion on him is that he was always going to leave the program. If there was a departure, it would be him leaving and not him getting fired. But at this point, that may change, because I think the pressure from the fan base and the alumni in Ann Arbor is becoming overwhelming at this point. The honeymoon period is over, and quite frankly, people are tired of Jim Harbaugh in Ann Arbor, and can't you blame them?
It should be over at this point. Yeah. Again, like I say, his 2015 and 16 looked really good. Took over a 5-7 team. I just ran the numbers because I'm going to post a video. They were like 49 and 42 the previous, whatever it was, 7 years. He comes in, they instantly win 10. They win a bowl game, finish in the top 10. They're 2016. They almost made a playoff. And since then, it's been the slow decline, and now they've fallen off the cliff. And they're just atrocious this year.
Yeah. And Clemson 897 asks a great question. Now, how hot is Franklin's seat really at Penn State? I don't think it's hot at all, Mark, and I don't think it should be. Yeah,
I don't get it. I don't get what people are talking about here.
This is not a situation like Will Muschamp. This is not a situation like even Jim Harbaugh, where these guys have never won their division. They've never represented the conference. They've never won any major significant bowl game or anything. James Franklin's done all of those things. And he took over a program that was in shambles, and he's really turned it around. So I just don't see any reason why. I mean, first of all, anytime you're talking about firing a guy like James Franklin, the question is, who are you going to get that's better than James Franklin? And I think it's the chances of finding somebody any better than him are very, very slim, very slim.
I'm not going to credit James Franklin with turning around Penn State. I think Bill O'Brien did that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but he took it to the next level, though.
Absolutely. He did. Absolutely. He did. So he got there. O'Brien did much better than I expected. I just thought that program was going to be in oblivion for a while. And O'Brien went 7-5, 8-4. And then Franklin comes in, goes 7-6. He actually, his third season was much like this one in regards to, he had gone 7-6, 7-6. He was off to a 1-2 start. and they had just lost to Pitt and been blown out at Michigan 42-10. And then he goes on a tremendous run. They win the Big Ten. They go to the Rose Bowl. And then since then, how do you fire a coach that's 40-11 the last 4 years, who's been to 3 New Year's Six bowls, won 2 of them, finished in the top 10 3 out of the last 4 years, and the other one was in the top 15, just because he starts 0-4? I think what's happened to this team, Pigskin Pete, is that they had a lot riding on this season. They were supposed to be the one team to challenge Ohio State, and they have been the number 2 team in the Big Ten. They lose this freak game against Indiana, his fault, but they lose it. They still dominate on paper, and Indiana's turning out to be a pretty good team. Mm-hmm. They dominate on paper. So their entire season's the Ohio State game. They have to win that game, because you lose that, you're basically 3 games behind, you're done. Well, they lose it. They're not as good as Ohio State. They lose that, and I think they're just mailing it in. Now, that is not a good look on James Franklin, because really good football coaches have championship aspirations at the beginning of certain seasons, and their teams at times fail early, and they're still able to rally them, keep the poise, keep the intensity, and still have a nice 9-3 season, and then move on to the next year. And they've just come off the rails in the last couple of weeks. So that's not a good look. But the 4 games after all he's accomplished in 4 years, I don't get it.
Plus, what is their average recruiting ranking under Franklin? It's got to be in the top 10, right?
Yeah, it's like 8 to 12. He's like in the 8 to 12 range.
I mean, that's 90% of it there. I mean, you have to have the players to win. And if you're recruiting at a high clip like that and being competitive in your conference and your division, nonetheless, which is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult division in all of major football, maybe the SEC West, you can make a case for. But yeah, so every coach has a bad year. And especially this year, I think you have to give some of these guys a pass. I mean, Will Muschamp's had it coming for a while, so he's a different story than James Franklin. James Franklin did not come into the season on the hot seat, as far as I'm concerned, so he shouldn't be now after 4 games.
And lost 3 of his best players before they took a snap.
Right. And they also had some other players opt out, I believe, if that's what you're referring to. Yeah. I don't know. So anyway, the coaching carousel continues in college football, and of course, everybody loves to talk about who fits best where and who should go where and all that sort of thing. So we'll keep an eye on that. Now, as far as these games last weekend, Mark, some good ones, of course. This past weekend was the biggest hit that we've seen in this crazy college football season. A total of 12 games, I believe, maybe even 13 games across the country canceled or postponed. Some of them canceled, some of them just rescheduled. We did see something that was odd that we haven't seen so far yet, that 2 teams in the Pac-12 have their games canceled. And in the midweek, they decide to schedule each other. So you had, who was it that ended up playing? Cal and
UCLA.
Cal and UCLA. And of course, they played yesterday on Sunday. But they made that happen very quickly within a matter of, 3 or 4 days.
Less than that.
Less than that.
This was like less than 48 hours. This was like a late Friday for a Sunday morning.
Yeah, which is a testament to the Pac-12 and to those 2 teams for making that happen. But the question is, why haven't we seen this happen in the Big Ten? Why haven't we seen this happen in the ACC? Why haven't we seen any of the conferences, the SEC, where they've been able to make something like this happen? I mean, a lot of the Big Ten games, they're just canceled. They're not even trying to move the game or reschedule it. Now, I understand you have to have two games canceled to have 2 teams free to play each other. So if there's only 1 game canceled, or if there's 3 games canceled, then somebody's gonna be on the outside looking in. But the Pac-12 appears to be doing everything that they can do to get as many games played as possible, I believe, so that they can make a case for the playoffs at the end of the season.
Yeah, what's funny about that is that the Big Ten was the conference that originally built the schedule in such a way that they could do that. So they were very transparent and open about, we're building a schedule. We're going to be the first Power 5 league on the field the first week of September, and we're building a schedule that we've looked at and figured out we can match up teams later in the season. But they're not doing that now, although I don't know that they've had the opportunity, because they only had 1 game canceled this past week. The week before, it was Wisconsin Purdue. I think it's just been the one Wisconsin game the previous 2 weeks. So I don't know that they had the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Thank you, GatorZoned, by the way, for the donation. Mark and I really appreciate it. It's the donations that keep this show going. Does USC, and I think he's saying USC Junior there, South Carolina, do they go after Meyer, McElwain, or Zook next? Well, thank you, GatorZone. But I don't, first of all, Urban Meyer is not considering taking the South Carolina job. He's one of the very few coaches in the world, certainly in this country, that could pretty much choose his destination. As long as there's a job opening there, they will most likely hire Urban Meyer. He's one of the top 3 head coaches probably in our lifetime, and he's still young enough to coach well. South Carolina is not on that list. It's not on the short list or the long list. Okay. So Meyer, no. McElwain's interesting it's more funny than interesting, Mark, because there's a running joke that South Carolina likes to hire former Florida coaches, right? With Spurrier and Muschamp, but it'll only be right for McElwain to be next in line. And he's been waiting a long time for his turn. Where is McElwain right now? He's a head coach at a group of 5 team, right?
Yeah, he's in the MAC at, I get the Michigan schools confused. I believe it's Western Michigan, Eastern Michigan, wherever he is, Central Michigan, one of those.
So I don't think that they'll hire McElwain, but that is, if they did, that would be the funniest story in football this year. And Zook, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Where is Ron Zook? He hasn't been around forever.
I don't know. I thought he retired or something.
So we've got Zook. We could go Muschamp or McElwain. I don't know that we've got anybody else we could pull out. Obviously, Spurrier's been done. Yeah.
Anyway, that's an interesting list he had there. Meyer being the funniest of all of those. Not happening. All right. So we had a couple of nail biters, Mark. This Miami team just continues to plug along, doing something this season that they haven't done in a while, and that's winning a lot of close games, typically, even over the past 10 years, and it's certainly over the last 5 or 4. Miami is known for dropping these games that they have, either have a lead in and blow it, or it's a close game and they can't finish at the end. They're winning those games now. Now this game against Virginia Tech, Virginia Tech really should have won that game. And I hate when people use that term. Well, they should have won. Well, they didn't win, so maybe they shouldn't have won. But I mean, Virginia Tech sort of handed the ball, the game over to them there at the end. But you got to give credit to Miami. They made the plays when they had to, under pressure, to come out 1-point victor. And they're sitting there with 1 loss, Mark. This late into the season, they're not mathematically out of the equation. All they need is a couple of things to fall their way on maybe Clemson's side or Notre Dame's side, and they could find themselves in Charlotte if they continue to win. I'm looking at their schedule, and I really think the only team on that schedule that should scare them is the most obvious one at the end of the season against North Carolina. Obviously, they lose that game, they're out, most likely. But they're still keeping hope alive there in Coral Gables.
But if they keep winning these 1-score games, maybe somebody that we're not expecting can jump up. I know it's Wake Forest, it's Georgia Tech this week, North Carolina. So that's it, right? It's just those 3. Okay, They only have 3 games left. These Miami fans, at least the ones that call my show, I don't know that they can necessarily, they seem to be on opposite ends of the spectrum. So I'm guessing, Pigskin, that if Clemson goes out there, and obviously they're at a completely different level than Miami, but still, let's say Clemson, let's say that BC game, it did kind of go down to the wire. It was a 1-score game until late. It was in that range that, let's say it would have come down to the last couple plays of the game, just like the NC State game, just like the Virginia Tech games did for Miami. Clemson wins the game when it looked like they were going to lose the game. Let's say they were down like Miami was down the last 2 weeks. You're happy in the moment. You're relieved. You can be both. Like, it was like Miami fans were either calling me disgruntled that we're really not that good, we need to get so much better. And I can agree with a lot of that. Or they were just so elated over the win that they were confusing being happy and elated in the moment that you won the game with we're great because we won. Well, you're not great. Again, I want to see this team play somebody on their level, but Virginia Tech's not that. They're playing a bunch of top 45 to 55 teams, and they're squeaking by. Now, that's a good mark because they haven't, in terms of progress, because they weren't doing that last year in the season before. So they're winning the games, but it's if you took the top 10 to 15 teams in the nation, that's where Miami's ranked right now. I don't know where they are now. They were 9th last week.
I think they're 12th.
I've got them down to 13. But so if you take the teams that are generally around them, not the group of fives, but the other teams, they're not going to go beat North Carolina State and Pitt and Virginia and Virginia Tech by one score week after week after week. They're going to win most of those games by 3 and 4 touchdowns. They'll have a slip up and play a close game against, they're not going to kill all of them 5 or 6 straight weeks, but most of them they will. Pick your top 10 team, top 15 team, and then have them go play the teams that Miami's been playing. They're not going to win those games by 3 and 4 and 5 points every week.
Right. I'm with you. I agree. Speaking of North Carolina, this is another very confusing team. I'm trying to figure out. So coming into the season, we knew Sam Howell was, highly touted. A lot of hope for him for the season. But the big news in North Carolina was they were returning so many players on defense. They were going to be a very veteran group. They expected to have a high-powered offense and maybe one of the top 2 or 3 at the minimum defenses in the entire ACC, and we haven't seen that. Now, the offense is clicking on all cylinders, it seems, right now. They're scoring a lot of points. Sam Howell's putting up gaudy numbers, video game type numbers, but they're winning 59-53 against Wake Forest. They lose to Virginia. They lose to Florida State. This is the most bipolar team that's still, not, according to me, they're not still up in the playoff conversation, but according to their fans, they are.
In the playoff conversation.
Well, I mean, if they can compete, so they're not mathematically out of the ACC. And now, again, things would have to happen to fall their way. They need Notre Dame to lose a game. They need Clemson to lose a game, and then they're probably still in the conversation. But at this point, they're going to play spoiler alert for one of these teams in the ACC. Most likely a Miami to knock them out. They also play Notre Dame. At this point, though, I'm trying to think. So that would be the tiebreaker there. So if Notre Dame loses one more game and then loses to North Carolina, then North Carolina would have the tiebreaker over them. So that would be their only avenue in to the ACC championship game. So they're not completely out of it, but it is very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
So. But I mean, the defense is what I'm getting at here. As bad as the defense is, that's the difference between being a 2-loss team in the ACC right now and possibly being undefeated is that defense.
Yeah, they're giving up a ton of points to everybody. That wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a little high on the high end, 53 against Wake Forest, but they're giving up those kind of points to everybody. They gave up 45 to Virginia Tech, and what was the Virginia beat them 44-41.
Yeah. And you're talking about teams that have a hard time moving the ball on anybody, putting up 40 and 50 points against this team. So nonetheless, so somebody, this is a great segue into the next question here. Somebody says, who do you think will win the Heisman? And the reason I'm bringing that up now is because there's people that believe that Sam Howell should be in that conversation because of the numbers he's putting up. I'm not really in that camp. I think that, first of all, where's his Heisman moment? The Heisman is usually on a team that is, a great team because of that one player, an outstanding player. I just don't see it happening at this point. Who I think will win the Heisman? You have to put Kyle Trask in that conversation, Mac Jones in the conversation. We still have a long way to go, though, Mark, with that.
Yeah, it's all the obvious guys. Mac Jones has great stats. So does Kyle Trask. So does Justin Fields. Obviously, he's only played the 3 games, but he's just playing out of his mind. Trevor Lawrence would have been, but missed the 2 biggest games of the year. To a certain extent, I guess you could look at him that way. I did. Boston College took him to the hilt and Notre Dame. So, yeah, in terms of a Heisman, the first time I looked at it, I'm not looking at guys' numbers every week to try to build some kind of Heisman list, but I did one week, or I did twice. The first week I did it, Sam Howell's numbers actually early in the season were good, but they weren't just crazy good, but they've become crazy good
Yeah.
in the last several weeks. So
Yeah.
I get it. I think you hit on the 3 Heisman points. It's number 1, winning. Number 2, like a moment or 2 or 3 in the season. If Sam Howell throws a game-winning touchdown pass against Notre Dame with 28 seconds left in the game, and they pull off some comeback from 17 down, that's going to be his moment. And then number 3, it's stats, just sheer stats.
Thank you, Luke Walker, for the donation. Luke is a North Carolina fan, for those who did not know. He says, both of our starting corners are out and our best safety is out, so most of the experience on our defense is gone. Okay. He's basically saying that's the reason the defense is folding like a lawn chair, is because they have some injuries to key players. Believe me, as a Clemson guy, I know all about that. But the only thing I would say to that, Luke, is most teams right now at this point in the season have key injuries, especially with the coronavirus year. You have a lot of players that are missing. For that reason, you had players that opted out. So not saying that does not affect it. It clearly does affect the defense, but it's a level playing field at this point. Everybody's having these issues, and it just is what it is. But thank you, sir, for the donation. Speaking of teams with issues and surprising teams, Mark, with all of the negativity surrounding some of the bigger name teams in the Big Ten, the Penn States, the Michigans, right? The Michigan States. We have a couple of great stories so far this year. And then the most notable one and the most surprising one is Indiana University starting out to a 4-0 start, and not just winning games, but looking really good doing it. And they're sitting in position now here halfway through. What are we at? Are we halfway through the Big Ten schedule now? Yeah.
Yes. 4 out of 8.
Yeah. So halfway through the Big Ten schedule, they're sitting there tied for first place in the Big Ten with Northwestern and with Ohio State. And is there anybody else?
That's it.
Wisconsin.
Well, Wisconsin, yeah, 2-0. Yep.
So how is this team really for real, Mark? Is this fool's gold, or are we seeing something that is sustainable in Indiana? Now, I'm not talking about them being in first place every season halfway through the year and competing for Big Ten championships every year, but is there a culture to what's going on in Indiana that's making this possible?
We moved on from the Muschamp conversation and his replacement in South Carolina, and Tom Allen's name popped into my head from Indiana. This guy's crazy in a good way. Like, I don't know that a lot of people out there have watched Indiana football, but I do, because I'm a nerd and I watch Indiana play, Illinois. But Tom Allen, this guy, like they were showing him during the game against Michigan State on Saturday, like this guy he's knocked out his front teeth. He had a bloody scrape on his face during this game just last weekend. He's done all sorts of things because, they showed after a big play a couple weeks ago, like he ran down his wide receiver and like tackled him. Like, he's just a nut. He just goes crazy. I've seen him do laps inside the stadium and high five the fans and just, practically, give himself a concussion running up against the brick wall. He's just a madman. So the players love him, and he's starting to get players to come to Indiana that are not at the top level, not great, but better than they've had for years and years and years on defense, especially because Kevin Wilson from Oklahoma came to Indiana, made them an offensive firepower, but they were bad on defense and couldn't win many games. And Tom Allen's done a great job there. We're going to get our question answered on Saturday against Ohio State. If they can compete against Ohio State, then I'm going to say, man, this team's a lot better than I thought they were. I don't think they're that good. How good do I think they are? I think they're top 25 good.
And this game's in Indiana, isn't it, this weekend?
I will have to double. I believe so.
I think it is. I'm not sure how much that hurts or helps. I still think there is a little bit of an advantage for the home team, just based on travel alone, but not the crowd.
Like, they went 8-4 last year. This didn't come out of complete nowhere, but now we're talking, going undefeated, being a Big Ten champion. Yeah, this would really raise the stakes. But, as a good team last year, a top 25-ish team, Ohio State beat them 51-10.
Yeah. And I'll be interested to see. I haven't looked at the betting lines. I'll be interested to see exactly how much Ohio State is favored in this game. Believe it's still going to be at least a couple of touchdowns, maybe.
Yeah, something in that range.
So that'll be interesting to see how for real Indiana is. And let's face it, there's been some criticism about Ohio State, not by any fault of their own, just the way that the cards fell, the way that the schedule fell. People are like, is this Ohio State team really as good as they look, or is it the bad competition they're playing against? So we'll get to see. I think we'll get that answer this week. Indiana is not, an Alabama. They're not a Clemson, but they're a really good team. So we might get a measuring stick on what Ohio State really is this weekend as well.
Unfortunately, Ohio State's missing all the good teams in the Big Ten West. They're not playing Wisconsin, Northwestern, Iowa.
Yeah. Do you think that was intentional when the Big Ten was put? I'm being serious here. When the Big
Exactly. I said the same thing at the time. I before the Big Ten revised its schedule, I thought, how are they going to treat Ohio State? Because by far and away, just like Clemson and the ACC, that's their poster child. Are they going to protect them? Or are they going to actually give them a tougher schedule because with limited number of games, they need to prove, well, if there was a conspiracy there, they definitely went the protective route.
Oh, they certainly did. But they couldn't predict how good Indiana was going to be.
Well, they played everyone in their division. They were going to play them anyway.
Right.
They kept them away from Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, who was supposed to be good.
Yeah, right. Anyway, that's interesting. So the way the Big Ten is shaking out this week is you have the 4 undefeateds, the Wisconsin and Northwestern, they play each other, and then of course Ohio State and Indiana, they play each other. The winner of those 2 games most likely will go on to play in the Big Ten championship. There's of course nothing set in stone yet. One of those teams could win this weekend and then lose the next weekend, but they would hold that tiebreaker in that case. So Wisconsin and Northwestern is another one. Northwestern is another great story of the season.
I love Northwestern. I'm a Northwestern fan.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
I root for those middling teams. Purdue, Northwestern. I like those teams.
Right. And Northwestern is another team that, what was it? 2 years ago when they had the great season. Was it 2018 maybe?
Yep.
And then they just went, they had high expectations for 2019. Of course, they had the Clemson quarterback coming in there, the former Clemson quarterback coming in there, former 5-star quarterback, had a bad year. The whole team was just bad. And I think the expectations were very low coming into the season, and they have looked really good. Now, is that sustainable? Or is just another sort of an Indiana type of situation where you're going to get these outlying years where everything comes together and you have a good season? And by a good season, I mean, in a 12-game season, you win 8 or 9 or 10 games maybe. But the expectation should not be that going forward the next year. Is that what you're seeing now?
Well, Pat Fitzgerald has built a good program at Northwestern.
Yeah.
And basically, they cycle through almost the same type of records and seasons all the time. Basically, what they're going to give you is that they're going to go 8-4 most seasons and go to a decent bowl game. And then they're going to have the 1 year like they had last year, every 5 or 6 years, where they go 3-9. He had a 3-9 about 5 or 6 years ago. And then he's going to have the 1 year where they hit everything right. They get the schedule where they need it. They go 8-1 in the Big Ten 2 years ago. They compete for a championship. But they've been finishing in the top 25 most seasons under him. He's had a really nice run. I think he's a really good coach. Always have. Other than Ryan Day, I think he's the best coach in the conference. I think they're Indiana good. I think, and this is one of the reasons why I picked. Now, I didn't expect Penn State and Michigan to fall off, but I only picked Penn State to go 6-3. It wasn't like I thought they were going to tear it up. I picked a glut of teams at 6-3 in the Big Ten below Ohio State's 9-0. And I think Northwestern's going to be one of those teams. I do think, Pigskin, that Ohio State, Indiana is more of a de facto final for the Big Ten East because Michigan's so bad. Penn State's out of it. Maryland they've still got a shot with only 1 loss, more so than Wisconsin, Northwestern, even though that's going to put the winner in a great position. All those teams, Purdue, Iowa, they all kind of beat each other. So I see it a little bit clearer in the Big Ten East than the West, although that's a huge game.
seeing the questions pour in here. First of all, do you believe, or do you have a feeling either way on, was anybody hurt or helped in the grand scheme of things, whether it was Maryland or Ohio State, by that game being canceled this weekend? Well, I mean, the argument could be made it helped Maryland because it kept a loss from occurring in the loss column. The argument could also be made that it hurt Ohio State just by having one less game on their schedule, although I don't really believe that. I think an undefeated Ohio State is what you need to have, and it's going to be hard to keep them out of the playoffs, whether they played against Maryland this past weekend or not. But do you see how that hurt or helped anybody there?
Well, if we would have been talking about this a month ago, we would have said Maryland's completely irrelevant. Who cares? It's just like beating Rutgers. Who cares? But then Maryland puts together 2 back-to-back efforts that it looked like that game had a little juice. Like, I didn't think Ohio State was going to be seriously challenged, but I was interested to see if Maryland could put points on them. And I saw that as maybe like a 45-31 game, something like that, where Maryland would give them a little scare, something to think about. And I did want to see that game. And Ohio State's so void of quality opponents, like Indiana's, they're almost it now. And then a Big Ten championship game. That if they lose a game, maybe they get left out as a Big Ten champion with one loss, Ohio State.
Right. And we're seeing, where is that? Does Harbaugh survive losing to Rutgers? Is that who Michigan plays this week?
Yes.
I doubt the Rutgers game makes a difference at this point.
I don't think it should. I think it's just going to show that they're continuing to spiral down. It will be another, I guess it could be a nail in the coffin in regards to you're this bad, you're losing to Rutgers. And I know Rutgers improved, but that's only an 8-point spread. And Michigan has routinely beaten them by 40 or 50 or 78-0 4 years ago.
I know we've already covered this South Carolina hiring thing, but this comment just popped up, and it's an interesting one. So I just want to explore this for a second. Richard Hill, thank you, sir, says, hearing talk about USC going after Lashlee. And when he's talking about USC, he's talking about South Carolina, and he's talking about Rhett Lashlee, the offensive coordinator for the Miami Hurricanes, a former offensive coordinator for, who was it, Auburn before that?
Yes.
Under Gus Malzahn.
We're forgetting about the 1 year at Connecticut, but yeah, generally Auburn. Yeah.
I think this is interesting. First of all, we talked earlier, if you guys are just joining the show, we spent probably the first 10 minutes of the show going over the different scenarios for South Carolina, as far as which direction they're going to go in. And we believe they're going to go in offensive direction based on what Ray Tanner said in the press conference yesterday. So that clearly fits the mold of what they're looking for. Fairly young guy. He's never been a head coach, right? Maybe Connecticut, you said, or he's only been an offensive.
No, he was the OC there.
Okay, so he's been an offensive coordinator at 3 programs, and so yeah, that would fit the bill. And I like. Listen, I'm sure you're going to see a lot of names thrown around. I like that name. It fits with where I think that they should be going, instead of, again, going after the proven head coach from another time period, basically, when you talk about Spurrier and Holtz, or going after the washed up guy from Florida that had a losing record there, and he's going to turn our program around.
I love Luke Fickell.
Yeah, me too.
Get him down there.
Yeah.
How about Matt Campbell at Iowa State?
It's another one. This is, again, this begs the question, which is a better job, South Carolina or Iowa State? Like, you can win 7 or 8 games at Iowa State and have a job there for 10 years. You're not going to get fired. That's not going to be the case at South Carolina.
So when we were talking about Paul Chryst, the first thing that came to mind, I made the Bielema comment, because Bielema was they're all making good money, obviously, but then he goes to Arkansas because they threw him like top 5 money. And so I'm thinking that that really turned the Big Ten to start paying coaches, because they hadn't been, and the SEC was paying coordinators $1 million plus, and the Big Ten was way behind. And now the Big Ten's kind of caught up because they knew that they had to start paying coaches. So I don't know what the coaching or the pay situation is at Iowa State right now, but I would think maybe he just goes because he can make $5 million instead of $3 million.
Yeah, that's true. I also believe that Mike Bobo is going to be, I mean, he's doing similar to what happened with Dabo Swinney whenever Tommy Bowden was fired, I guess, is the season was a wash. It was downhill. Let's promote a guy from within and see what he can do. Can he give a spark? So Mike Bobo is auditioning for the head coaching job for the remainder of the season. If he goes out there and wins 3 of his last 4 games, or how many games they have left? 3 maybe. If they go 2-1 or 3-0 in those last 3 games, I mean, that's probably not going to happen, especially if you look who they have to play. Georgia's one of the teams they have to play. But I think that in that scenario, they'll give serious consideration to Mike Bobo. But other than that, I think they'll go after somebody like a Lashlee, somebody like a Luke Fickell.
Matt Campbell makes $3.5 million at Iowa State.
Right.
I would think that South Carolina would pay $5.5 million. Mel Tucker makes plus over $5 million at Michigan State.
Yeah.
It's a nice raise.
That's about their number. I think they're right around $5 million is where they're going to start out here for their next coach, which is somewhere around what they were paying Muschamp, if I had to guess, somewhere between $5 and $6 million. But anyway, nonetheless, interesting. Let's move on to, with the few minutes we have left here, Mark. I want to talk a little bit about Notre Dame, because one of the biggest games of the weekend on paper was the Notre Dame and Boston College matchup. Because of beating Clemson, because of taking the reins as first place in the ACC, moving up in the top 2 or 3 in any poll you're looking at nationally. And the knock on Notre Dame was, well, yeah, they beat Clemson, great, but now can they continue the success, or are they going to go out there and possibly either lose to Boston College or struggle with Boston College and sort of come back down to earth? And the question got answered for me. Notre Dame is not a fluke team. They are one of the best 4 teams in the country, in my opinion, right now. I think they proved that to this point. This game, Mark, I don't know if you watched it, but it was never in question. They completely dominated Boston College. Now, I'll give some credit to Boston College. They made a few big plays, made the score look a little bit closer than the game actually really was, 45-31. But this game was never in question. Never.
They didn't make the score close enough.
No.
You know what I mean? For me. But they didn't get to 11.5. But yeah, I expected it to be a really good game, but not down to the wire. Notre Dame to win, but they were more impressive than I thought. I'm right there with you. I had a number of people ask me in the last couple of days, callers ask, who are the 4 best teams in the country? I ripped off the obvious 3. I mulled it over a little bit, and I filled in Notre Dame.
I'm with you. And Ian Book, so coming into the season, I had Ian Book on my short list of Heisman candidates. The first, 4 games maybe, he just was very inconsistent. The defense, the Notre Dame defense is what kept them in several of those games, particularly like the one against Louisville was at 12-7 or something final score. But these last 2 weeks, it looks like a different guy. Starting with Clemson, a bad timing for Clemson for Ian Book to start playing like the Ian Book that we thought he could be. If you just look at the past 2 weeks and forget about the beginning of the season, he's at the top of the Heisman list.
He's not going to win it statistically.
No,
but to your point, in terms of a storyline, in terms of, okay, this guy's leading a team that we didn't expect. Not that it's a shock. We know Notre Dame's good, top 10 good coming into the season, but if it's the other 3 that we expect in the playoff, plus Notre Dame, and Ian Book is the main reason, especially in the biggest game against Clemson, yeah, throw the stats out. They're going to be good, but I've looked at them recently. They're like the kind of stats you would just guess most of the quarterbacks in the country have. But to your point, they're in the playoff because of Ian Book, and he played the best in the biggest game. Then he has a good one against North Carolina because they're going to be a challenger. That's going to be the other one. If he throws for 250, a couple touchdowns, they win the game by 10, or he's got to throw one late, lead a drive for a game winner. And what's interesting about the Heisman, I don't know if you know this, we learned the other day that it's going to be a virtual presentation on January 5th, but I don't know when the votes are coming in because it's usually the week after the conference championship games. This is going to be after a round of playoffs. Like I don't know when the votes are going to be in.
I would imagine the votes are going to have to come in before that, right?
Hope so. Yeah.
Of course, we could do an entire show. We don't have time to do it today on the validity of the Heisman, or the vote, the way that the voting is done, by who is doing the voting. Anyway, my personal opinion is that there's way too many Heisman voters. And
there are people like us that love college football, watch it incessantly. And then there are guys who are covering baseball most of the year and get a Heisman vote because they've been writing for the AP for. When I moved here to Connecticut, I started listening to a radio show, Mike and the Mad Dog in New York. Great radio show. These dudes talk about baseball practically every day of the year, talk about the Yankees and the Mets, talk about the Giants, the NFL. They'll talk about college football like the weekend of the Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn game and the national championship game. And they've got Heisman votes.
Yeah.
And they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Mad Dog, I know who you're talking about. He's not a college football guy, and he's voting on Heisman's. That is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Anyways, Notre Dame looks clearly like one of the 4 best teams in the country. Be interesting to see if they can finish it off. Of course, they do have, I believe, a most definite rematch with Clemson. I mean, Clemson would have to really stumble for that not to happen. So I think it's pretty inevitable you're going to see Notre Dame and Clemson, and that should be one for the ages. I forgot.
Yeah, the ACC is finally going to give us a nice championship game.
Yeah. Right. How long has it been? It's been a long time.
The North Carolina, Virginia Tech, they both gave Clemson a game. It wasn't like this is epic, but they were in the ballpark.
Yeah, the North Carolina game, right, that came down to an onside kick attempt. We won't go down that road again. This Clemson guy, I don't want to talk about that. Anyway, but really one of the biggest games every season is Bedlam. We have that this weekend, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Not going to turn out probably to be as important of a game as it is in years past, but maybe. I don't know. What do you think, Mark? I mean, Oklahoma State's sitting there with 1 loss. Oklahoma has 2. I think a win for Oklahoma here would just shake everything up in the Big 12. You have multiple 2-loss teams. But a win for Oklahoma State would knock Oklahoma out of the chances here to make the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, practically half the league has 2 losses. Like there's West Virginia and Texas and Iowa State and Kansas. They have all these 2-loss teams. And then you got Oklahoma State, who I think, based on what I've seen, is the most well-rounded team. They actually play defense. They've got a good defense. They've got one of the best wide receivers in college football, one of the best running backs in college football. A little inconsistent at quarterback. I think Oklahoma State's better, but this is certainly, to me, almost a toss-up game, and elimination for the Big 12, certainly, if Oklahoma wins. Oklahoma State's the one chance they have, and it's a small chance, but is a 1-loss team to get through.
So at this point, if you're just a fan of the Big 12 conference, forget the teams within the conference. If you're a fan of the Big 12 and you want to see the Big 12 represented in the college football playoff, you want Oklahoma State to win out, right, Mark?
That's your hope. That's it.
Because Oklahoma State loses in Bedlam this week, the Big 12 is out of the playoffs as far as I'm concerned. I just don't see a 2-loss team getting in there.
Not from that conference, especially.
Not from that conference, right. I'd probably say the only conference that can afford to have 2 losses is probably the SEC.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're a fan of the Big 12, then you are now a Cowboys fan, at least for the rest of this season. So
the SEC could give us this. Hopefully Florida beats Alabama in the championship game. And then you've got both of them with 1 loss, and you got Texas A&M sitting on the side with 1 loss saying we beat Florida.
Yeah, right. Thank you, GatorZoned. Texas A&M versus Ole Miss was postponed. Well, that's of course not surprising, Mark. We'll probably see several more games this week and every week here on out, either postponed or canceled. So you're telling me it's postponed, so that's not canceled. The question is, I mean, we're running out of weeks to make up games here, Mark. So when are they rescheduling this for? That's what I want to know.
So my Texas A&M person that I have on every week, she told me last week that this game probably would be postponed. And it looks like the SEC is going to go the Big Ten route and Pac-12 route of playing a schedule the weekend of the conference championship games.
Yeah, did hear that.
Yeah.
Now, okay, that's the SEC. So the Big Ten, though, they're having games that week anyway.
Yes.
Right? Well, the entire conference is playing every week.
And the Pac-12.
Yeah, and the Pac-12. So yeah, that's interesting. Too bad too. That was a game I was actually looking forward to seeing. Well, all of the Texas A&M games for me are must watch at this point because they are the most interesting story in the SEC. They could certainly find a way to backdoor their way in the college football playoff if everything falls their way that they need it to. Thank you, Wilkie. He says West Virginia plays defense. Mark, well, Mark didn't say anything about them not playing defense, did you?
I said that I thought Oklahoma State had the best defense in the conference.
Oh yeah.
But I didn't say nobody else did. I think Texas has a good defense. And West Virginia is holding people down. They only gave up, I think they beat TCU like 24-6 Saturday.
Yeah, I think the metric that they use for total defense is what? Is it yards per play allowed or something? It's a very subjective way to judge who's a better defense and all that. But at this point, I believe West Virginia is leading in the nation. In defense.
Yards per play. I'm a big proponent of yards per play rather than it's always been total defense yards per game.
Right. Okay. Anyway, whatever metric they're using, they're calling West Virginia the number one total defense in the country, and they have been for several weeks now, which is pretty surprising coming from that league. But too bad they don't have an offense to match, Mark. West Virginia's offense is not very good. So anyway, nonetheless. Some interesting games this weekend. Bedlam being at the top of the list, and of course, I believe Ohio State and Indiana. Where's game day? Do you know? Is that going to be in? It's got to be in Indiana. When's the last time that's happened? Never.
I am the last person to keep track of that.
Well, I don't really pay attention to that much either, but I do like to see where they go. And there's been some crazy ones this year because of the coronavirus. But if game day is in Indiana, that would be a sight to behold, Mark. I mean, we saw it at the Masters tournament this week. That doesn't get much weirder than that, does it?
Yeah, I was kind of intrigued by that. Even though I didn't watch it, I totally forgot about it. I did hear that and thought, I wouldn't mind looking at that. But it's kind of funny, some of my connections to the show in the past in regards to, but I haven't. And it's a tremendous show. It's the gold standard. But I just don't watch it. And I'm going to watch so much college football on a Saturday. I'm not going to sit there and watch 3 hours of pregame.
Well, I was wrong. I for some reason, I don't know why, I thought that Indiana was the home team this week. They're telling me in the comment section here that the game is actually in Columbus. It's not in Indiana. So I don't know why I thought that. It's the way I wrote it down. I wrote it down as Ohio State being the away team, but I just didn't do my homework, Mark. All right, guys. It's now 1:00. Mark, let everybody know where they can find you if this is their first time watching. First of all, if this is their first time watching, they need to make sure they hit the thumbs up and subscribe button on this channel, my channel. But Mark is out there doing big things, has several YouTube channels. Let them know where they can find you, Mark.
Yeah, we're not going to get too crazy with a complete list, but Mark Rogers TV, you can search it right here on YouTube. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Videos posted all the time, multiple times every day. Live streams featuring, at this point, Miami, Florida State, Ohio State, Nebraska, and call-in shows just like Pigskin Pete does here. So give us a try.
Great. And thank you to all the people that stopped in today. Thank you to all the people that sent in donations, Mark, and I really appreciate that. We could not do the show without you. Make sure you share this to all of your favorite social media outlets. And that's it. Any last words, Mark?
Should be a fun week. I love this like semifinal matchup, East and West in the Big Ten. That should be a whole lot of fun. And let's continue to watch Notre Dame and North Carolina. Yeah, let's see if they can start playing some defense to see if the ACC can be pretty interesting here down the stretch.
I agree. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week at noon right here. Thank you.